Good day and greetings. Good evening, Washington, all of Mauritius, as we open the Black Consciousness Festival on the Reparations. The good evening, Washington. We begin first. Baba Lego. Related to, related to, related to. Titulari, Mojiba Mari, Mujaba Borisha, Mujaba Borisha. Open up today, the paths, open all the doors for success and for blessings throughout all that's happening today. Speak also to and we say thank you for all that will be done, for all the knowledge that will be shared, for the peace amongst us, for all the action, all the change that will be coming through our ways. We will say, I'm sharing with the good, with the good. And where we get thanks to the revolution, we get thanks to Odulua, Ashe, Obatala, Ashe, the Guerreros, Oun, Osun, Oshosi, and of course Power. We continue to give thanks to the Caribbean Orisha, so many more around the world. Mama Oya, Ashe, Mama Oshun, Nemaya, Oba, we continue to give thanks. God gave us some work with so many of us, Baba Shango, Aganju, and continue to ask that all of you who one work with us to continue to search, to fight, to seek, to work together for the success of repatriation for all of the children of Africa, around the world. We really very relationship. So because we get continuous stance, of course, we ask our Elungu, our ancestors, Ashe, to work with us. Ashe, all of our individual Elun, all of the Elun of the families, of all of those who are here with us, connected with us via this virtual space. And of course, you can call your ancestors' name. And we ask for all of the all of those who were lost in the train, to take us and to walk with us constantly, that we look at our world. We thanks for all it that continues to guide us in these decisions. Maybe we shall work with all of the team of the Black Consciousness Festival, all of the speakers, give us the gift of communication, of sight, of clarity, and of peace as we continue to seek what is ours, that what is ours will be with you. Ashe?
Ashe. Ashe. Ashe.
Thank you, Janique, for opening with the African libation. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So as we begin our program, my name is Journey, and I'll be your host for today. Before we begin, I want to have Festival Director, Erica M.B. Ashton, say a few words.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you to Janique for starting us off with that so important libation. So welcome to this weekend of conversations where we join in the discussions around the idea of reparations. Building, contributing to those discussions that have been held over the years and that continue to be held in numerous spaces. We are excited to do our part by creating a space where we can tell our stories, share our experiences, where we can listen, connect across the diaspora, build awareness, and raise our consciousness, our collective consciousness for the work that has to be done to realize justice and to heal. That healing for ourselves and for our communities. We are pleased to be sharing the space with our Indigenous family as they join us from Brazil and Guyana. We'll get the opportunity to hear a few of their stories and experiences. We will also hear from our brothers and sisters of African descent in Colombia and Argentina, whose stories and experiences we don't generally get to share in. We will hear from the youth, and we will hear from the elder, Mr. Earl Lovelace. A really beautiful time for us to share, reflect, and strategize. As we participate in these conversations, I invite us to listen critically, to share the information, to discuss, to agree, disagree with what you hear, to be curious, to do your own research, to talk with the elders in our communities. They too have stories to share. They are part of our history. They are part of our lineage. They are part of our healing. And we should be documenting what they have to say, what they have to share, as we build on our technologies for a collective healing and restoration. Healing, repairing, reparations, it is about the money. Let us not forget that. We have not moved on from that, the money owed. And it is more than the money. It is also about us understanding what was done, the ongoing trauma for all of us, and which has been documented. And in this process, taking responsibility for our healing. And how do we do this? I think we can start by remembering what we know, that which is deep within each of us. We're remembering that we are more than what we have been taught, what we have been told. Remembering, we were not created in sin. We do not have a sinful nature. We do not need a savior or saviors. We are not victims. We are divine. We are whole. We are magic. We are magnificent. And we are called to embark on this journey of healing, repair, and restoration for ourselves, our ancestors, and for our future generations. We claim, we reclaim, we reconnect with our indigenous and ancestral technologies, our indigenous and ancestral ways of knowing and being, our connection to and reverence for nature, our awareness that there is no separation, that we are connected with all beings through time and space, that spirit is with us, in us, around us all the time. We embrace our spirituality in all its forms, the Orishas, spirit guides, animal guides, wisdom teachers, the rituals and libations, our food, our healing arts and medicine, our herbs, our bush, our baths, sweat lodges, our dance, drumming, kalinda, sacred circles, fire circles, our chanting, our singing, our mourning, our joy, and so many other technologies that are available to us. Our journey to healing also requires that we are present in our bodies and in our spaces. We have a responsibility to be present. We have work to do. We have power. We have agency. We claim and own that agency. We stand up in our courage. We use our voices. We speak up. We say and we show how we want to live and how we want to be for ourselves, for each other, for our ancestors, and for our community. No permission required. We are present. We are here. We breathe. We take up space, claiming what is rightfully ours, knowing that there is enough for all of us. And we do this consciously, lovingly, and joyfully. Reparations, justice, healing, wholeness. Thank you. Enjoy the conversations.
Thank you, Erica. That was absolutely beautiful and so important for us to remember as we move forward. So, to continue with our program, we have opening remarks on reparations from Mr. Eric Phillips, the chairman of the Guyana Reparations Committee and vice chair of the CRC CARICOM Reparations Commission. Mr. Eric Phillips.
Ladies and gentlemen, organizers, participants, and sponsors, greetings from Guyana. It's a great honor to have this opportunity to share some thoughts with you at this very important and timely festival, and especially a festival with a theme that addresses claiming what is rightfully ours. This Black Consciousness Festival, with its motto Pride, Power, Practice, can be a transformational event to prepare us for the critical battle for reparations. For 519 years during the transatlantic slave trade, and for 11 centuries during the Arab slave trade, Africa and Africans were purposefully dehumanized by the so-called civilized world. Slavery was the first nuclear bomb the world has ever seen. Slavery destroyed Africa, African culture, African family structures, African institutions, African economies, African generational growth, and African people as a world power. Racism was the second nuclear bomb the world has ever seen. Racism came with slavery. Racism was purposely created by religious persons, European philosophers, historians, politicians, businessmen, and the European culture to justify the horrific, inhuman, and ungodly institution of slavery. Slavery had very many evolutions. We saw colonialism, neocolonialism, there's imperialism, and today, rampant capitalism. Maafa is a word that best describes the more than 500 years of suffering of our people and of our continent. Indeed, the United Nations Durban Conference correctly defined slavery as the greatest crime against humanity, African humanity. Slavery was a transformative economic event of yesteryear. Capitalism is its successor. Slavery transformed Europe from a feudal, agrarian economy to an industrial superpower. It took Europe from the Dark Ages into a period of unprecedented growth, which created a foundation for Europe's economic, social, cultural, political, diplomatic, and cultural ascendancy today. Slavery was the beginning of pure, uncontrolled capitalism and of rampant globalization. Slavery lacked morality, lacked humanity. It embraced unimaginable exploitation, caused millions and millions of deaths, and was simply the greatest crime on earth. Slavery also transformed Africa from its natural historical economic evolution into the dark continent it's called. History has not been kind to us, and that is because it's been written by others. Witness the famous statement, "Until the lions have their historians, tales of the hunt shall always glorify the hunter." Our history has been distorted to justify colonial, religious, economic, and cultural atrocities. Racism is a result of this, and many of our kith and kin now believe in the curse of Ham, a false negative in our spiritual and mental frameworks that paralyze us from being who we are. During this festival, you need to remember who you really are. Yes, who you really are. We are the first human beings, the first engineers, the first doctors, mathematicians, agriculturalists, teachers, lawyers, diplomats, architects, writers, librarians, metallurgists, chemists, biologists, scientists, as well as the first mothers, fathers, children, husbands, wives, uncles, etc. History is not something that's in the past. We're living history today. History is a living organism of memories, hopes, accomplishments, events, peoples, and places. The historical impact of enslavement is today visibly seen everywhere. It's been generational. Reparations, therefore, has to be our quest, and should be the quest of all Africans and their descendants. Slavery has resulted in racism, generational poverty, and identity crisis, cultural schizophrenia, and most recently, state capture of our countries and communities by private corporations, international institutions, governments, and rampant capitalism. Today we are free, but everywhere we are in chains. psychological change, economic change, cultural change, political change, religious change, as well as the change of diplomacy. In this world, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. It's slavery all over again. What can we do to reclaim our pride? We can educate ourselves. Rather, we need to re-educate ourselves. We need to decolonize our education. But we need reparations to fully regain our economic, political, and cultural power. Reparations in the region was first championed by the Rastafarian community, and of course by the Most Highest, Market Messiah Garvey, who said, back to Africa. He had a philosophy of dignity and destiny. First, a philosophy of self-healing by going back to our African roots and culture. And second, he preached economic independence as a means of creating generational wealth and self-determination. Today in the Caribbean, we have a Prime Ministerial Subcommittee in Reparations, a CARICOM Reparations Commission, 13 National Reparations Group, and a Kimba, which is a Youth for Reparations group in Guyana led by Kibe Copeland. We also have a Center for Reparations Research led by Professor Brian Shepard, and we've created a 10-point plan for reparatory justice. As Sir Hilary Beckles has proclaimed during his address to the House of Commons in Great Britain, the 21st century will and shall be the century of reparatory justice. We need to be prepared. Hence, this festival is really important, especially given the new consciousness now being raised by the Black Lives Matter movement. Events like this festival help us to re-educate ourselves, allows us to share our stories, help us to reflect on the crisis and issues facing us, help us to build awareness, help us to raise consciousness, and enable us to start discussions which will ultimately allow us to build agency for our just cause, the cause of reparatory justice. This Black Conscious Festival is a critical event of self-healing, of self-recognition, of self-belief, and of self-reflection. This festival is also standing on the shoulders of its ancestors, Queen Yaya Asantewa of Ghana, Queen Nzinga of Angola, Queen Nani of Jamaica, King Zumbi of Brazil, Governor Coffey of Guyana, King Busa of Barbados, Nat Turner, Sir Juna Truth, Marcus Garvey, the Black Muslim movement, the Black Panther movement, and most recently, the Black Lives Matter movement. Witness the continual carnage that has been hidden from history, such as highlighted in the 100th anniversary of the burning of the Black Wall Street. I hope this event results in a clarion call for action and a platform of solidarity through an oasis of strength. What card can you play as an individual? We all have parts to play, individually and collectively. We are all in this together. We're a single organism, an African organism, separated by language, religion, geography, and different colonial masters. But we are a resolute, powerful, generationally rich pool of DNA from our African ancestors. Knowing who you are and understanding the realities of being Black in this world is a critical first step in each of us contributing to this cause, the cause of reparatory justice. The world knows we've been wrong. We know we've been wrong. We know that others wronged have been given reparatory justice. The message today is simple. We need to build a spiritual, intellectual, political, and economic community among ourselves. We need to hear and see ourselves more. We need to be each other's keepers. Let us live by the spirit of Ubuntu, which is, I am, because we are. Remember, when brothers fight to the death, a stranger inherits their wealth. And when there's no enemy within, the enemies outside cannot harm you. Let us live by the principles of Kwanzaa, the principles of community. We need to recognize that there is a racial hierarchy in the world, and we perceive to be at the bottom of that hierarchy, and therefore perceive to have the least power. We need a united Africa, and we need Africans throughout the world to unite for a common cause, the cause of reparatory justice. We need to unite in spirit, in person, and in action. I urge you to use this festival to continue on the path of self-healing, so that through pride, power, and practice, we shall be successful. Tutu Shinda, we shall overcome. I wish you a terrific festival. May God go with you.
Thank you so much to Mr. Eric Phillips. I now welcome Alicia Afua Bartels to do an excerpt from Souls by Earl Lovelace.
From Earl Lovelace's Salt. To the Right Honourable Lord Baron Gleneagle, Her Majesty's Principal Secretary of State for the Colonial Department. The memorial of the undersigned African subjects of Her Most Gracious Majesty the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland humbly showeth unto your Lordship that your memorialists are natives of Africa, that during the existence of the slave trade, your memorialists were torn from their country, their friends, relations, delivered into the hands of slave merchants who imported your memorialists into the West Indies and sold them, that the names of your memorialists have been changed, that the work of the labor of your memorialists has gone not to their own advancement, but to the upkeep of those who commanded unlawfully their labor. As a result of the circumstances of their enslavement, your memorialists have no other option now but to make this island their home, since it is the place that many of them have been born into, and it is the place that their labor has gone to build. Your memorialists believe that in the interest of justice, of humanity, of harmonious relationships existing in the future between those who have profited from our captivity and those of us who have been captives here, that your most gracious Majesty do grant your memorialists relief in the form of land, in the form of amenities, and such other means as your gracious Majesty might see fit as a form of reparation for wrong done to us, and as an expression of regret from your most gracious Majesty for the position your humble subjects have been placed in through no fault of their own, and despite every effort on their part over the centuries to prevent your memorialists from being reduced in this most degrading fashion. And he had stood there and watched as Caraboan read it and read it yet again, his moustaches trembling and his eyes getting red and a sickly look coming across his face, his whole body growing more calm, more amazed as his eyes went down the page, until at last he looked up with his now dangerous, now threatening calm. "You joking with the Queen?" "No, sir." "You joking with me then?" With this half-sternness in his voice, as if he was trying to come back from a limb he had stepped out on. "No, Mr. Caraboan. What do you want me to do with this?" "We just asking for a beginning, sir. A new start." "A new start for whom?" Caraboan asked him. "For both of us." "What do you want me to do with this thing?" Caraboan asked again, his anger almost mastering him. "I would like you to support it. You making a joke, right? You have been granted compensation for the loss of our labor. Now we want compensation for the mashing up of our lives. You expect the Queen to answer this? The governor will view it as insolence." Jojo, take a deep breath. "But if you support it, if you tell him of the justice of our claims..." For a moment, Caraboan looked directly into his eyes, trying to force him to avert his gaze. But Jojo kept his eyes unblinking and his head straight. "I see," Caraboan said, his eyes still fixed on Jojo's. "You expecting a lot, too much." And it was then that Jojo saw in Caraboan's eyes something like guilt, and something like shame, and something like rage, and Jojo knew that Caraboan knew that now he had either to carry forward Jojo's claim or to destroy him. From that day, Caraboan tried his best to get Jojo to withdraw the letter. He wanted to rent him the plot of land he had been working on, then he wanted to sell it to him. He put the matter in the hands of his lawyers. They outlined the conditions to Jojo. He had to have cash to pay. Jojo didn't have money. "Well, there has been a misunderstanding," the lawyers said. "Perhaps you should apply to the government for other lands." Of course, Jojo knew that that was no solution to the matter, and that in any event he didn't have the money to purchase, and the landlords made it impossible for him to join with other people because the policy was to sell no less than 80 acres of land, and that to a single buyer. "You have money to buy 80 acres? If you have the money, you could get the land in the morning," the lawyer said cynically, his face shining in a grin. No, he didn't have the money. That is not what he was thinking. He was thinking that these people were forcing him into battle. They had brought enslavement to an end, but they had no new policy, no real new vision of how the plantations were to run and how people were to live in freedom. Yes, there is a misunderstanding, Jojo tell him. And this time he went himself to talk to the people working still on the plantations about new plans for battle for their freedom. Faustin was having meetings with Daga, the African prince who had been captured by the Portuguese and rescued by the British, who had baptized him into the Christian faith, named him Donald Stewart, and put him in the West India Regiment stationed at that time in St. Joseph. They had a plan. Daga and his recruits were expected to seize the barracks at St. Joseph. Once it was secure, they were to give a signal for the apprentices, that was the new name they gave them, from the estates nearby to join them. Together, they were to march to Manzanilla, make connection with the African soldiers settled there since fighting on the side of the British against Napoleon. Here they were to set up a council, which was to rule the land. As it turned out, that was not to happen. Daga and his 200-odd recruits botched the revolt by a set of singing, yelling, and wild shooting. No signal went out. The apprentices never rose up to join him. 40 people were killed. And Daga and some of his men were captured just outside of Arima. They were court-martialed and 3 of them sentenced to death by shooting, Daga himself singled out and characterized as a madman leading a set of stupid fellas who, they were happy to report, planned to walk to Africa by way of the sea from the seacoast at Manzanilla. Daga himself had been a seafarer and had come to the island by ship. He couldn't have believed that he could walk to Africa. But that was the tactic of those in power. Every black leader had to be seen as a madman. For white people to feel themselves human, they had to make black people appear to be beasts. And they would push black people on the defensive by an unending program of propaganda that would reinvent black people as demons, largely unacceptable as proper humans on account of their blackness, their laziness, their cannibalism, their stupidity, their simple-mindedness, their mimicry, their criminality, their immorality, their licentiousness, their unlawfulness, their childishness, their dancing and singing, their rhythm.
Wow. Amazing words from Salt by A. Lovelace, which brings us to the end of our launch of Claiming What Is Rightfully Ours, a weekend of conversations all about reparations. But it brings us to the first conversation that we'll be privileged to have with Earl Lovelace. So thank you everyone for joining us for our launch today. And please join us for our very first conversation on our live stream. Thank you again. And remember, work in pride, power, practice.